We don't always notice the stories that arrive quietly. Sometimes they're already standing there, hands steady, voice lowered by habit, waiting for the noise to pass. This one stayed with us because it never asked to be seen. Aiko Morita is an artisan who works with urushi lacquer in a rural town far from where she grew up. What she carries isn't ambition, it's memory. This is how she remembers it. I was already awake when the workshop lights came on. The humidity gauge blinked once, then settled. I wrapped my hands before touching anything. If I didn't, my skin would flare up by noon. "Careful," my grandfather said from the doorway. He never raised his voice. He just waited until you listened. "I am," I told him. I checked the room twice. He nodded and left me to it. That was how we worked. My phone buzzed on the bench. An email. A boutique in the United States wanted to confirm a small order. Limited run. Nothing flashy. Enough to matter. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. For a second, my chest tightened. Not excitement. Something older. "Congratulations," my grandmother said from behind me. She had seen the subject line. She always did. "Thanks," I said. The word felt heavy in my mouth. She poured tea. The cups clinked softly. That was when the front door slid open. A man and a woman stood there, smiling like they'd rehearsed it. "My goodness," the woman said. "You've done so well." I didn't recognize my own voice when I answered. "We're open to visitors today," I said. "Can I help you?" She blinked. The man frowned. We noticed how still the room became then. Nothing dramatic, just a pause. I looked at them again and felt the old word settle in my throat. The one I learned before I was 12. Unnecessary. If this sounds familiar, you already know why it matters. When we still lived in Sakai, our apartment always smelled like paper and detergent. My brother's notebooks were stacked neatly on the table. Mine stayed in my bag. No one asked to see them anyway. Perfect score again, my mother said one night, tapping Ren's test with her finger. "See, I told you." My father laughed, loud and satisfied. That's how it should be. Effort pays off. Ren didn't look up. He just kept eating. I shifted in my chair. The sound of the fork scraping the plate made my head buzz. I tried to eat slower, quieter. My mother noticed. She always did. "Sit properly," she said. "You're distracting." I nodded and pressed my knees together under the table. At school, teachers called on Ren to answer questions. They called on me to ask why I wasn't paying attention. Chairs moving, pencils clicking, the clock ticking too loud. My thoughts scattered before I could gather them. Focus. A teacher snapped once. "It's not that hard." At home. My father stood behind me as I tried to do homework on the floor. "You're still on that." His voice carried disappointment more than anger. "Ren finished hours ago." "I'm trying," I said. The words came out wrong, tangled. My mother sighed. She always says that. Later. Ren leaned close while we waited for the bus. "Don't talk to me here," he muttered. "People stare." I nodded again. That was easier than explaining. At night, I heard my parents talking through the thin wall. "We can't waste resources." My father said, "She's different." My mother replied, "We have to be realistic." I lay awake, counting my breaths, learning something without meaning to. In our house, love came with conditions. We visited my grandparents twice a year, summer and winter. Long car rides where my brother slept and my parents talked over the radio. When we arrived, everything felt slower, like the house was breathing at its own pace. My grandmother opened the door with her sleeves already rolled up. "You're hungry," she said, not asking. "Come in." She handed me a towel for my hands before I even took off my shoes. That small thing mattered. I didn't have to explain. My grandfather nodded from the kitchen table. "You can put your bag there." I did. No one checked what was inside. While Ren studied in the next room, I sat on the floor with old flyers and colored pencils I brought from home. I matched colors to the hills outside the window. Green wasn't just green. There were many kinds. My grandmother passed behind me and stopped. "That one," she said, pointing. "That's how the light looks in the evening." She taped the paper to the refrigerator. No applause. No instructions to improve it. At dinner, my grandfather poured tea carefully. "Eat," he said. "You worked. Worked." The word stayed with me. That night, I slept without counting sounds. No one told me to be quieter. No one reminded me to hurry up. In that house, nothing needed proof to exist. Spring break started with boxes. They appeared one morning along the wall, already folded, already labeled. I hadn't noticed things missing until then. The bookshelf looked thinner. The hallway felt wider. We sold the apartment. My father said, standing by the door like he was announcing a schedule change, "Pack what you need." My brother laughed from the couch. "You didn't realize they've been clearing stuff for weeks." I kept my hands still. If I moved too fast, I'd forget something. If I moved too slow, someone would get angry. My mother pointed toward my room. Only essentials. I packed clothes first, then my sketchbook. The pencils went in last. Everything fit into one small box and my school bag. That felt wrong, but I didn't say it. The car was already running when I came outside. Ren wasn't there. I stopped by the door. "Is he coming later?" My mother didn't turn around. "Get in." The seatbelt clicked too loud. I stared out the window as buildings slid past. Then shops. Then long stretches of road. No one spoke for a while. I tried to read their silence. That was something I'd learned early. Maybe this was temporary. Maybe they were doing things differently. Maybe I was finally being included in something without being in the way. I held on to that thought as the city disappeared behind us. It stayed with me until the car slowed and turned onto a narrow road I recognized. The car stopped in front of my grandparents' house. For a moment, relief rushed in so fast it made my chest hurt. I reached for the door handle, already picturing my grandmother's slippers by the entrance. The kettle whistling. The door was locked. I tried again. Slower this time. Same result. "They're at work," my father said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. Weekday. I turned back to my mother. "Should we wait?" She sighed, sharp and tired. "We told them already." My father opened the trunk and pulled out my box. He set it down by the door, careful not to scrape the paint, then placed my bag on top like he was arranging luggage. Not a person. I stepped closer. "So, am I staying here for a bit just until we move?" My mother finally looked at me. Really looked. Her face tightened, like she'd been holding something in for years. "You don't need to pretend you don't understand," she said. "This is better for everyone." "I can try harder," I said. The words tripped over each other. "At school, I mean. Or I can stay out of the way more." She laughed once. Not kindly. "If I had known about your condition, I wouldn't have had you. You take up space and give nothing back. You always have." My head went quiet. Not empty. Just still. My father leaned out the window. Engine humming. A new life starts now. For the three of us. The car door closed. The lock clicked. I took a step forward, then stopped. My legs didn't listen anymore. My mother added one last thing through the open window. "Don't make this harder." The car pulled away. Gravel shifted under the tires. The sound faded. I sat down next to my box. The porch felt colder than I remembered. I wrapped my arms around my knees and stared at the door, waiting for footsteps that weren't coming. I stayed there until the sky began to change. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember my hands going numb. Then the sound of a car door slamming hard. My grandfather's voice cut through the dark. "Aiko." I tried to stand and almost tipped over. He caught me without saying anything, his jacket rough against my cheek. Inside, the lights were too bright. My grandmother wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and pressed a warm cup into my hands. "How long were you out there?" she said, quieter than I'd ever heard her. I shook my head. The words wouldn't line up. My grandfather picked up the phone. His jaw tightened as the call went on. "No," he said once. "That's not acceptable." Then he hung up and didn't move for a moment. The next day, people came. Not family. A woman with a notebook. A man who spoke carefully, like every sentence mattered. "Can you tell me what happened?" the woman asked. I tried. It came out uneven. My grandmother stayed beside me, her hand steady on my back. The woman nodded and wrote. She didn't interrupt. Paperwork followed. Forms. Signatures. My name printed more times than I'd ever seen it. My grandfather explained things slowly. Once. Then again when I asked. "They left you," he said. "That's not allowed." Letters were sent. Calls were made. No answers came back. A few weeks later, my school changed. So did my address. The adults stopped asking me to wait. What happened to me wasn't just remembered anymore. It was written down. The new school was smaller, fewer desks, fewer voices at once. That helped. My teacher spoke slower than the others had. She waited after asking questions. Not long, just enough. "It's okay to take a moment," she told me once, tapping the edge of my notebook. "You don't have to rush." After class. My grandfather walked me to the workshop behind the house. The smell there was sharp and earthy. He handed me gloves before I touched anything. "This will irritate your skin," he warned. "If it does, you stop." I nodded and dipped the brush anyway. By the end of the week, my hands were red and itchy. By the end of the month, they blistered. "I can't do this," I said one evening, holding them up, embarrassed by how weak they looked. My grandmother examined them, then reached for ointment. "You don't have to do it forever," she said. "You just have to decide if today is the day you quit." I didn't answer. At a local craft show, I set my pieces on a plain table. People stopped, looked, moved on. One man paused and shrugged. "Nice work," he said. "Hard to sell." That night, I slid one piece toward the trash. My grandfather caught it before it fell. "You made this," he said. "That means something." I washed the brush, cleaned the table, wrapped my hands. The next morning, I opened the workshop door again. The studio was busier than usual that afternoon. Doors open, shoes lined up crooked by the entrance. Someone laughed near the shelves. I was explaining the finish on a tray when my grandmother's shoulders stiffened behind me. "They're here," she said. I turned and saw them standing just inside the doorway. Clean coats, careful smiles, the kind people practice in mirrors. My mother stepped forward first. "Aiko," she said brightly. "Look at you." A few customers glanced over. My father nodded, like this was a scheduled visit. "We're so proud," my mother added. "We always knew you had it in you." I felt my jaw tighten, not from anger, from effort. "Welcome," I said, keeping my voice even. "We're open until 6. She laughed lightly, still so polite. My father leaned closer. "Business looks good. It's steady," I replied. "Please watch your step." I turned back to the group by the table. "These are people from my past," I said. "They won't be staying long." The room went quiet in a way I recognized. Not awkward, alert. My mother's smile slipped. That's an odd way to put it. My grandfather appeared beside me, holding a thin folder. He set it on the counter without opening it. "You've said enough," he told them. My father's eyes flicked to the folder, then away. "We just wanted to talk." "Not here," I said, "and not like this." My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. They left without raising their voices. The bell on the door rang once. I finished answering a question about care instructions and didn't look at the door again. Ren showed up on a gray morning, standing just inside the gate like he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch anything yet. "I heard you're hiring," he said. His voice sounded thinner than I remembered. My grandfather looked him over once. "We're always short on hands." Ren nodded. No smile. No explanation. He started with cleaning. Buckets, rags, the floor near the sink where lacquer dust settled. His shoulders tensed when my grandfather corrected him. He didn't argue, just fixed it and moved on. At lunch, he ate standing up. "You can sit," my grandmother said, pushing a stool closer. "Later," he answered, already reaching for another stack of trays. We didn't talk much, not about the past, not about our parents. He didn't say sorry. I didn't ask him to. One afternoon, he scraped his knuckles sanding a piece too fast. He winced, shook it off, went back to work. "Slow down," my grandfather told him. "This isn't a race." Ren nodded again, slower this time. In the evenings, I locked up and found the workshop clean, tools in place, floors swept twice. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He stayed. Dinner was quiet, not the tense kind. Just quiet. My grandmother set the bowls on the table. Mine was one I'd finished the week before. The edge wasn't perfect. She ran her thumb along it anyway. "This one feels good," she said. My grandfather lifted his glass and nodded once. Ren sat across from me, hands folded, waiting until everyone else started eating. Later, he cleared the table without being asked. When he reached for my bowl, he paused, then carried it carefully to the sink. That small pause stayed with me. A few days after that, his phone buzzed while we were closing up. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening, then turned it face down. "They tried again," he said. I didn't need to ask who. He went outside, came back a minute later, and set the phone on the counter. I changed my number. I nodded. That was enough. That night. I stayed in the workshop after everyone left. I ran my fingers over a finished piece and felt the layers underneath. Time. Mistakes. Waiting. For a long time. I thought surviving meant proving something. Now I know what it actually looks like. My name is Aiko Morita. I didn't go back. I stayed. We see stories like this more often than people admit. If it stayed with you too, you know where to find us.